Hello and welcome to Golaem Crowd Quickstart tutorial. In this video, we will show you how to create and render a simple crowd scene. You can get the Golaem Crowd packages from our website by filling the evaluation form. You will receive the download links just after submitting it. The installation is pretty straightforward, but if you need help, you can find the installation guide in our support section. Let's start Golaem Crowd. To be correctly loaded by Maya, Golaem Crowd needs to set several environment variables. It is done for you if you launch Golaem Crowd using the Start menu shortcut. Otherwise, you can check our script and manually set the needed variables in the maya.env or in your system. Let's load the plugin now. Go to the plugin manager and load Golaem Crowd. Check the autoload box. You can see in the script editor if Golaem Crowd is loaded. Let's check if your Maya settings are correctly set. Maya needs to be set to play every frame. You also need to check that the Maya scale is set to centimeter. You also need to make sure the locators are shown if you want to see your crowds. The next step is to create our first character. Characters are defined by their entity type. It contains a character file which defines the skeleton and geometry of your character. It is also linked to a behavior which tells your character what to do. Load the Crowdman character from our samples. You should have downloaded the samples pack at the same time you downloaded the Golaem Crowd package. Next, create a terrain node. For now, we will just use the default planes. It will make sure our characters are snapped to the ground. To place characters, use the population tool. You can adjust the number of characters, distance, add a bit of noise, and change orientation. Then create your characters. The population tool will create a particle system, because Golaem Crowd is particle-based, and link it to a crowd field which will place characters on top of the particles. Check the scene settings once again. Everything is okay. Add a few frames and click play to see your characters. You can see their skeletons and notice that they are not doing anything. It's because we did not define any behavior yet. If you click on a character to activate the visual feedback, you can see useful information like IDs or velocities. In this panel, you can visualize the running behaviors. We will come back here later. And here, you activate or deactivate several debug helpers. Let's now try to set a mesh on our characters. Select the entity type. You can see here that a rendering type was loaded from the character file. It defines which assets we are going to assign to each character. Change the display mode to Render Previs. Golaem Crowd complains about the missing rendering type because we did not rewind the simulation yet. Let's do that. You can see that the geometry was generated randomly based on the different assets which are in the samples, like short or trousers, for example. We will see this better when we load the shaders. Right now, our characters are all orange, which is the default Golaem Crowd shader. If you open the character maker, In the Geometry tab, you can find more information on the base assets and the rendering types. For example, here we have one haircut, t-shirt or sweatshirt, and short or trousers. The rendering type that we assign to our character is like a recipe telling how to build a character. You can use the sliders here to specify that you want more or less of each asset. Let's get more t-shirts. Do not forget to save the character file after modifying it. What you see in the middle of the scene here is the character maker locator. It shows the skeleton of your character when you open it in the character maker. We do not really need that for now, so just remove it. Again, you need to rewind and play for modifications to be taken into account. Let's add some shaders and render them now. First, you need to select another renderer than Maya Software. Then click on the Render Proxy icon. Since our shaders are not loaded, it asks if we want to import them. Yes, please. Go again in the Samples, Crowd Shaders directory and select the Crowdman Mental Ray shaders. The Render Settings test tells us that we did not export our simulation yet. Let's do that. But first, let's refresh the geometry to get our shaders displayed. And let's export the simulation. Let's say the first 100 frames. OK, done. This creates a small simulation cache for each frame, containing the position of the characters and their joint orientation, so that we do not need to export the full geometry for every character. We will rebuild the geometry at render time. When the renderer will hit our render proxy here, it will call the Golaem Crowd procedural rendering plugin, which will load the cache and generate all those guys. The white guy in the middle is the one with the shaders. It should not be hidden, otherwise the shaders will not be found by the renderer. In our sample files, we just unchecked all render stats so that it will not be rendered, but you can also move it outside of the camera view. Let's render. You can notice differences in the shading between the viewport and the rendering, because we also have procedural shaders that can, for example, modify HSL at render time. Open the behavior editor to animate the characters. It defines the timeline of your characters. It starts from the initial point to the final point. And we will drag and drop behaviors in the middle. Drag and drop a motion behavior here. Double-click on it to load a motion. Crowd, Motions, Audience, Loop, Stand Watching. Play the simulation. Maybe you noticed that they are playing the same motion exactly at the same time. As the motion is a loop, you can randomize the point where start playing it using the start percent attributes. Click on a character to display visual feedback again. You can check the footprints computed for your motion, and you can see here that a motion behavior is running. You can show or hide the motion clips, or directly select the motion behavior to modify it. When the visual feedback is active, the active behaviors are highlighted in green, so that you can know where your characters stand in the behavior graph. It can be helpful to debug a simulation and know which behavior is blocking the flow. Let's re-export the simulation including this animation and render again. If you want to be able to scrub the timeline, replay your simulation without recomputing it, or simply edit your simulation cache. You can use the simulation cache proxy, and now you can freely scrub the timeline. You can also edit the simulation cache by selecting a character and using the cache proxy node. Do not forget to save the cache again after editing it. You can even import the skeleton of your character and modify it using the Maya tools. Do not forget to use the auto key mode or set keyframe yourself. Otherwise, the modification will not be taken into account when saving the cache again. Render again, and you can see the results of your manual modification in your render. That's it for now. Thank you for following this tutorial, and see you next time.